He was a truly unique human being and somebody who I think exemplifies in some way the law school in a way that many people don't. He was not a typical law school professor. He had a series of stories that he would tell or not tell depending on whether he liked the class he was teaching. I, for example, never got to hear the wrestling story, which is apparently a really good story. So you should ask other people if they will tell you the wrestling story. But in federal courts one day, on a spring day, much like the one we're having today at Reunion in 2013, Professor Pascal was teaching federal courts. And we were on a room that was on the lower floor, I think facing towards the West Campus, and outside you could hear somebody mowing the grass. And Professor Pascal was teaching, I think, Erie Railroad versus Tompkins, or some relative of that doctrine. And he was, as he was wont to do, berating people for not understanding anything he was saying. He would call on students and he would say, "Mr. Katz, what can you tell me about this doctrine?" And somebody would answer the question and he would say, "That is idiotic." And after 2 or 3 of these answers, he threw up his hand and he said that we were some of the stupidest students he had ever had. Everybody knew the answer to this question. He went to the window, he threw the window up and he yelled out, "Lester!" And the man who was mowing the grass, who was a person in maintenance of many years' age, came over, poked his head in, and he asked Lester the question of, "What's the rule in Erie versus Tompkins?" And Lester pronounced something, whereupon Pascal closed the window and turned around and said, "See, everybody knows the answer to that question." Delightful guy. He used to walk his little dachshund around. One of my classmates almost didn't make it out of the law school, I think, because Mr. Pascal would call on him and he would never answer the question because he didn't know he was being called on, because Mr. Pascal spoke with a deep, deep Southern accent. And my friend was from New Haven. His father was a professor at Yale and could not understand Professor Pascal and did not know he was being called on. So we had to have a visitation with Professor Pascal at one point to explain that actually Dan was in class. He just couldn't understand he was being called on.